The call came at 2:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake anyway, lying on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling fan that had been wobbling slightly since February, and that Garrett had promised to fix 4 times. The phone lit up on the nightstand. Mom. And my stomach dropped the way it does when you know, before you even answer, that something is broken. She'd had a fall. Not a bad one, she kept saying. Not a bad one at all, but her wrist was swollen and she couldn't drive herself, and the neighbors were off, and she didn't want to bother anyone. She never wanted to bother anyone. That was the thing about my mother. She would sit in pain in the dark before she'd ask for help. I'm coming, I said. I was already sitting up, reaching for my jeans. Garrett didn't move. He was on his back with one arm over his eyes, and I could tell by his breathing he wasn't asleep. He'd been doing that lately, pretending. I didn't have the energy to think about what that meant. Mom fell, I said. I have to go to Portland. A pause. Then, she can't drive. Her wrist might be broken. He made a sound. Not concern, something closer to inconvenience. Can't she call a cab? My mother was 67 years old and had never taken a cab alone at night in her life. I didn't say that. I grabbed my overnight bag from the closet, the blue one we'd taken on our honeymoon 7 years ago, and I started putting things in it. I'll be back in a few days, I said. There's food in the fridge. He didn't answer. I zipped the bag and I left. The drive to Portland was 3 hours and 40 minutes in good weather. It was January, so the roads were slick past the pass, and I had to go slow through the dark. I drank gas station coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and I listened to a podcast about true crime that I didn't absorb at all. My mind kept circling back to the look on Garrett's face when I said I had to leave. Or not a look, exactly. The absence of one. The complete and total blankness of someone who has checked out so thoroughly that even his wife's emergency doesn't reach him anymore. I thought, when did that happen? And then I thought, you already know when. My mom was fine, all things considered. The wrist was sprained, not broken. The ER confirmed it around 6 in the morning after 3 hours of waiting in plastic chairs. She sat with her hand in a brace and apologized twice for calling me, and I held her hand with the brace and told her to stop apologizing, and we got drive-through breakfast on the way back to her house and ate it at her kitchen table, while the sun came up pink over the backyard where I'd grown up. I stayed 4 days. I told myself it was because my mother needed help. Cooking, laundry, driving her to the pharmacy. That was true. But it was also true that I didn't want to go home. That sitting at my mother's kitchen table with her cats walking across my laptop and the smell of her coffee felt more like home than the house I actually lived in. On day 3, I called Garrett. It went to voicemail. I texted him. He replied 4 hours later. Okay, sounds good. I sat with that text for a long time. On day 4, I packed my bag and I thanked my mother and I drove home. I had a meeting at the hospital on Tuesday that I couldn't reschedule. I'd been a pediatric occupational therapist for 11 years, and my caseload didn't exactly pause for personal complications. The drive back felt shorter somehow. Dread compresses time. I got home at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday. The house was quiet in the way that means someone has been there recently. Dishes in the sink, a beer bottle on the coffee table, shoes by the door that weren't mine. All of that registered normally. Then I went upstairs to put my bag away. The bathroom was wrong. I noticed it the way you notice something when you don't know yet that you've noticed it. A kind of peripheral snagging, a detail that doesn't fit. I set my bag on the bed and came back to look. The counter was wiped down. Garrett almost never wiped down the counter. There was a faint smell, something floral and synthetic, not my shampoo, not anything I owned, and on the edge of the tub, wedged between the faucet and the tile, a single false eyelash. Small, curled, unmistakably not mine. I picked it up with 2 fingers and held it up in the bathroom light. I was completely calm. That surprised me. I thought I would cry, or shake, or feel the floor tilt. Instead, I just stood there in my own bathroom, holding evidence of my own humiliation, feeling something cold and clarifying settle over me like water. I put the eyelash in a tissue. I put the tissue in my coat pocket. I went downstairs and I poured myself a glass of water, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I waited for my husband to come home. He came home at 6. He smelled like he'd showered somewhere else, his hair still slightly damp, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. He said hey and dropped his keys on the counter and opened the fridge like it was any other Sunday. How's your mom? He asked. His back was to me. Better, I said. The wrist is sprained. She's okay, good. He pulled out a beer. You hungry? I was thinking of ordering Thai. I watched him. He was 38 years old. I had known this man for 11 years. I knew the way he held a beer bottle and the way he stood at the fridge and the exact cadence of his voice when he was hiding something. I had known it for months, if I was being honest. Longer. But knowing something and naming it are two different kinds of courage. There's a restaurant charge on the joint account, I said. Friday night. Viridian. That's the new place on Morrison, right? He didn't turn around immediately. There was a half-second delay, barely noticeable, and then he turned around with the beer in his hand and a perfectly constructed look of vague recollection. Oh, yeah. Client dinner. Melissa from the Hendricks account, she wanted to try that place. Melissa. He'd given her a name without being asked. Amateurs always give a name. On a Friday night, I said. They like to do dinners, he said. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was. I didn't say anything else that night. I ate Thai food across the table from my husband, and I watched him talk about a podcast he'd been listening to and a problem with his car's rear tire. And I smiled in the right places. And I felt nothing except that cold, clear thing that had settled in me upstairs. It felt like purpose. The next morning, after Garrett left for work, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my coffee, and I started being very, very careful. I'm an occupational therapist. We are, by training and by nature, observers. We watch how people move through difficulty. We notice adaptations, compensations, the small adjustments people make when something doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I brought all of that to my marriage, and I applied it methodically over the next 10 days. I looked at the joint account first. Viridian on Friday was $87. There was another restaurant charge the week before. Alma, $42, a Tuesday. 2 years of statements, and I started going back through them with the spreadsheet open, the way I track my patient's progress notes, date and detail, and dollar amount. The pattern was there. It had always been there. I'd just never looked. I looked at his phone once. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know the shape of the thing. He was in ZD's shower and it was on the nightstand, and I had 40 seconds. The contact was listed as M. Chen, Hendricks, but the texts were not professional. They were very much not professional. I put the phone down exactly where I'd found it, and I got in my car and I drove to the park near our house, and I sat in the parking lot, and I breathed. Her name was Melanie. She worked with him. Based on the timestamp of the oldest message I could find, this had been going on for at least 8 months. Possibly longer. 8 months. I had made this man Thanksgiving dinner 8 months ago. I had bought him a birthday gift, planned a weekend trip to the coast that he kept saying we should reschedule. I had been living inside a lie for 8 months and performing my half of it flawlessly. I called my best friend Colette from the park. She answered on the second ring because that is what Colette does. I told her everything. Are you somewhere safe? She asked. That's how she thinks. Practical first, feelings later. I'm in the car, I said. I'm okay. I'm not crying. Isn't that strange? I feel like I should be crying. The crying comes later, she said. First comes the planning. Do you want help planning? I did. That's what I needed. Not comfort yet, not processing. I needed someone to help me think. Colette was a paralegal. She had been through her own divorce 4 years ago, and she had come out of it with a settlement that her attorney called impressively strategic. She was exactly the right person to call. Don't touch anything in the house, she said. Don't move money, don't close accounts, document everything first. Get an attorney before he knows you know. Oregon is a no-fault state, but documentation still matters for asset division. Start making copies. I listened. I wrote things down. I thanked her. And Liv, she said. That's my name, Olivia. Liv to everyone who knows me. You didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't sure that was true. I thought I'd done something wrong by not seeing it sooner. But I didn't say that. I found an attorney that week. Her name was Brenda Holt, and she had a small office on Burnside, and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she had the kind of manner that made you feel like whatever you were walking in with, she had seen worse. I told her everything. She asked precise questions and took notes in a yellow legal pad without looking up very often. Oregon is equitable distribution, she told me. That means the marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily 50-50. Marital waste, money spent on an affair, can be factored in. Do you have documentation of the restaurant charges? I had printed statements. I had them organized by date. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Good, she said. Keep going. I kept going. 2 weeks of gathering everything, organizing everything, saying nothing. I went to work every day and saw my patients and wrote my notes and came home and made dinner and smiled and talked about normal things. I don't know how I did it. I think the clarity helped. The purpose. I took photos of the bank statements on my phone and emailed them to myself. I printed the credit card history and kept the folder in my office at work. I took note of the 401k accounts, the equity in the house, the investment account we'd opened together 3 years ago. I documented the dates of the restaurant charges against my travel calendar. 5 of the 8 dinners happened while I was out of town for work conferences. I was meticulous. My patients would have recognized it. That same attention I brought to tracking a 6-year-old's fine motor progress. I brought it to the disassembly of my marriage. Garrett noticed nothing. That detail probably hurt more than anything else. That I could be moving the furniture of our life into boxes, and he was standing right there, and he was too distracted by Melanie, from the Hendricks account, to notice his wife dissolving. I served him with papers on a Thursday morning. I'd arranged for Colette to have my overnight bag at her apartment and for Brenda to file that same day. The process server came to the house. I'd already left for work, and when I came home that evening, my lock had been changed. I had a locksmith on call. I let myself in with the new key. Garrett was standing in the living room with the divorce papers in his hand and an expression I hadn't seen from him in so long I'd almost forgotten it existed. Real emotion. Raw and unmediated and too late. You knew, he said. For 3 weeks, I said. I set my work bag on the counter and walked past him to the kitchen. Liv, I have a meeting with my attorney on Friday, I said. You should get one too. Brenda is very thorough, and I'd rather we both have representation than drag this out. He stood in the kitchen doorway. The divorce papers hung from his hand. He looked like a man who had been certain, until this moment, that the rules of the game were different than they were. Is this? He started. Is this really what you want? I thought about the wobbling ceiling fan, the 4 promises to fix it, the $87 at Veridian, the eyelash in the tissue in my coat pocket, 8 months, the birthday gift, the trips we kept rescheduling. I've already signed mine, I said. You have 45 days. He signed in 31. Brenda was, as she had said, very thorough. The settlement included a significant portion of the investment account to account for documented marital waste. She had used that phrase precisely, the way a surgeon uses a scalpel. And the equity in the house was divided in a way that Colette described, when I called her after, as satisfyingly correct. The house sold in 3 weeks. It was a seller's market. I got my half in my account on a Tuesday in April, and I sat at Colette's kitchen table. I'd been staying with her since the separation, and I stared at that number and felt something strange and new move through me. Not happiness yet, but the outline of it. I was 36 years old. I had 11 years of professional experience, and a professional reputation I'd built entirely on my own, and half the equity from a house I'd spent 6 years making into a home. I had a best friend who had given me her spare room and stocked the fridge with the good sparkling water because she knew I liked it. I was not fine. I want to be honest about that. The crying did come, eventually. Colette had been right about that too, and there were nights when I lay in the spare room and felt the loss of the life I'd thought I was living so acutely that I couldn't breathe right. Not the loss of Garrett exactly, not the man he actually was, but the version of the future I'd believed in. The kids we'd talked about, the house on the coast. The ceiling fan finally fixed. Grief doesn't always make sense in proportion to what you've lost. Sometimes you grieve the version of things that never existed. That's its own specific kind of hard. But I went to work. I saw my patients, a 4-year-old with sensory processing challenges, a teenager recovering from a hand injury, an elderly man relearning how to button his shirt after a stroke. I focused on them with the same precision I'd focused on the documentation, the statements, the spreadsheet. It helped. Purpose always helped me. In July, Colette dragged me to a gallery opening in the Pearl District. I didn't want to go. I put on a green dress I hadn't worn since before everything fell apart, and I went because she had been very patient with me and I owed her. The gallery was bright and crowded, and the wine was better than I expected. Colette got pulled into a conversation almost immediately, and I stood near a series of large-format photographs and studied them earnestly because it gave me something to do. With my face. The one on the left is the best, said a voice next to me. I looked. The man standing there was maybe 40, with the kind of quietly put-together look that suggests he chose his outfit without thinking too hard about it. He was looking at the photographs with genuine interest, not performing it the way some people do at galleries. I'm still deciding, I said. Fair, he said. Take your time. We stood there in companionable silence for a moment, which was unusual enough that I glanced at him sideways. They're all the same river, he said. Different seasons. She shot them over 4 years from the same spot on the bank. I looked again. He was right. I hadn't noticed the continuity. How do you know that? I read the description card, he said, and smiled. And there was something uncomplicated about it that I hadn't encountered in a long time. His name was Theo. He was an architect. He'd grown up in Portland, moved away for 12 years, moved back 2 years ago, to take care of his father during an illness, and found he didn't want to leave again. He told me all of that gradually, over the course of an hour and a half, while Colette watched from across the room with an expression I recognized as restrained smugness. I didn't tell him about Garrett that night. I didn't want to lead with it. I didn't want the first thing he knew about me to be what had been done to me. I told him about my patients. About the 4-year-old who had spent 3 months learning to hold a crayon and last week had drawn his first person. Arms outstretched, fingers spread. Theo listened the way people listen when they're actually interested, not waiting for their own turn. We exchanged numbers. He texted that same night, just, "The one on the left really was the best. Good night." And I read it in the spare room at Colette's and felt something small and tentative stir. I was careful. I want to say that clearly. I was very careful because I was also very aware of what happens when you run from one thing directly into another, how easy it is to mistake relief for love, comfort for connection. I took my time. We had coffee, then dinner, then long walks on the East Side Esplanade, where he'd run since college. I told him about the marriage and the divorce on the 3rd month, sitting at a riverside bar with the October sky, turning pink, and he listened to the whole thing without interrupting, and then said, quietly, "I'm sorry that happened to you, not I can't believe it or what a jerk or any of the things people say when they're performing sympathy. Just that, a clean, direct acknowledgement that something real had hurt me." I looked at him for a moment. "Thank you," I said. Around that same time, I heard from Colette, who still had connections to people in Garrett's professional orbit, that things had become complicated for my ex-husband. Melanie had ended things not long after the divorce papers were filed. Apparently, the affair had a different texture when it stopped being a secret. He'd been passed over for a promotion he'd expected, partly, Colette suspected, due to the professional awkwardness the situation had created at the firm. He was renting an apartment near the airport, the unfurnished kind, with white walls and gray carpet, and had apparently told a mutual acquaintance that he had made a mistake. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard that. I want to be clear about that too. I felt something quieter, a kind of settling, like a thing finding its correct level. He had made a mistake. It was simply true. The consequences of the mistake were also simply true. Neither of those things needed me to celebrate or gloat to be real. What I felt, mostly, was relief that it wasn't my problem anymore. I found an apartment in November. Small, 2nd floor, with big windows that faced east and a kitchen that was my favorite thing about it. Old tile, open shelving, good light in the mornings. I moved in with my half of the equity and a set of furniture that was entirely mine, chosen without compromise or negotiation. I painted the living room a shade of dark green that Colette said was bold, and I said was exactly right. Theo helped me move. He carried boxes without being asked and reassembled my bookshelf with focused, unhurried competence, and then ordered pizza and sat on the floor with me among the boxes and ate it without plates because we hadn't found where I'd packed them yet. It was a good evening. One of those ordinary evenings that feel, in retrospect, like something that was always meant to happen. My mother came to visit in December. She walked around the apartment, touching things and looking out windows with a small, satisfied expression. "This is a good space," she said. "You feel settled here." "I'm getting there," I said. She looked at me from the kitchen doorway, the same doorway where I'd watched Garrett stand with divorce papers in his hand. But that was a different kitchen, a different house, a long time ago. "You seem lighter," she said, "since the last time." I thought about that. I was 37 now, and I had learned some things in the past year that I hadn't known before. That calm is a form of power. That documentation is its own kind of dignity. That when someone shows you who they are, the wobbling fan, the deliberate pretending, the half-second delay before lying to your face, you are allowed to believe them. That grief and relief can exist in exactly the same breath without canceling each other out. I thought about the eyelash in the tissue in my coat pocket. I'd thrown it away long ago. I didn't need it anymore. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Theo came for dinner that Sunday. He brought wine, and my mother liked him immediately, which was not nothing. She had never liked Garrett, And I had never asked her why, and I think we both knew the answer. We ate around the table in my green-walled apartment, and the light came through the east windows. And my mother laughed at something, Theo said, and the sound of it filled the room the way good things do, quietly, without announcing itself. I looked at him across the table. He caught my eye and didn't say anything, just that uncomplicated smile. There were no promises made that night. No declarations. That wasn't what the moment called for. The moment called for good food, and my mother's laugh. And the kind of ordinary evening that becomes, without your realizing it, the foundation of something real. But I remember thinking, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Not the performance of it, not the structure of it. The house, the timeline, the plan for the coast that kept getting rescheduled. The actual thing. The ease of it. Someone reading the description card and telling you what he learned. Pizza on the floor among boxes. A man who listens without waiting for his turn. I had rebuilt carefully, slowly, the way you rebuild anything that matters. Not all at once, but piece by piece, with attention to what's load-bearing and what isn't. My mother went home on Tuesday. Theo texted when he got back to his place that night. She's wonderful. You're lucky. And then, after a moment, I think I might be too. I read that in my apartment with the east-facing windows dark and the city spread out below and the green walls around me, and I thought about the ceiling fan I'd never asked anyone to fix, because I'd gotten a new apartment, and the ceilings were fine. I didn't need it fixed. I was already home.